a story that says somewhat Putu's life. Ki yeshu achim yachtov umeis achad mihem. You have brothers that are living together and one of them dies. As we heard before, in Putu's case, it wasn't one. It was an entire family. Putu came back and he was the only one in his family. We can imagine his human desire to build a family, to rebuild his lineage, to carry on the heritage of his father, his mother. Like the pasuk continues and says, the importance of the halachas of Yibum and Chalitza, the pasuk says, L'hakim la'achim shem b'Yisrael, that we have a strong mitzvah and a desire to set up a name, b'Yisrael, a name amongst the Jewish people for our family. And we have a whole mitzvah and a whole mesechta of Yevamis that discusses this mitzvah. And how can we just imagine coming out of the war? Putu mentioned us many, many times how when the Nazis Yom HaShemam came, they gave him a job. And his job was, when they brought the cattle cars of the people, his job was to bring water. He opened the cattle cars, he gave water, and before they closed it, and brought them to their final resting place. And Putu would talk about that experience with such mixed emotions, because on one of those cattle carts that he opened and he brought water to, he saw his father. His father was on one of those carts that he gave water to. And he would always talk about the guilt that he had, as if he could do something. That he had to close the gates on his father after bringing water. Can we imagine living a life with that thought haunting you? And then coming back after the war and wanting to rebuild a family. As we heard, it was a beautiful wedding. And not long after, Naomi became pregnant. But because of lack of sufficient medical care, and I heard the story in different versions, but basically, that they lost the child, and because of the way that the child was lost and the lack of doctors that knew what they were doing, she also lost the ability to have children. Can we imagine the agmas nefesh? I know that Putu would say, when Naomi told me how he went to this Rebbe's bracha and he said he's not going to leave the room until we'll promise him that he'll have a child. He said he can't promise him. Can we imagine the tsar and the agmas nefesh of coming out and Yeshu achim yachtav v'meiz achad mehem, it's not just one brother, it's an entire family, and he wants to make a shame, like Yimoch Shmoim Yisrael, that his name should not be erased from the Jewish people. And let's envision for a moment coming back. The question we started with was, why can't we, with our simplistic eyes, look at a person and calculate the value of their mitzvah? When a person does a mitzvah, when a person does a good deed or an aveirah, chas v'shalom, something wrong, whether it be in regard to his ben adam chaveri, the way he treats others, or whether it be in the way he does a mitzvah towards Hashem, like Shabbos and Tefillin, it's not done in a vacuum. You have two people sitting beside each other, putting on the same tefillin. Let's talk about Putu for a moment. He's sitting in this very simplistic way, and he puts on tefillin. And Putu wasn't a big shuffler, and he puts on his tefillin. But imagine the emunah and the bitachon, the faith and the dedication after such a ratzon to build a family, and you can't. And now he puts on tefillin every day, keeps Shabbos, or with those scars that are left from such a terrible, terrible feeling and he needs to interact with people, can we actually judge how great each ma'isa mitzvah, each act of either bein adam chaveroi, between a person and his fellow, or a mitzvah that he does Shabbos and Tefillin, can we calculate? When a person like that comes to Shamayim, his mitzvahs, chas v'shalom, his averis, are on a totally different scale. A mitzvah is not just the action, a mitzvah is the history, is the pain, is the everything that leads up, the background that follows into that mitzvah. It comes to mind, thinking about Putu, in closing, we say every time is tzibur, every fast, we read a Haftarah, and I think the Haftarah speaks very clearly to Putu and gives him a nechama, to Neini. The pasuk says, "Val yoymar hasoris hein ani eitz yavesh," and the one who is barren from children shall not say that I am dry, that I have no memorial. Ki koyomar Hashem l'sarisim asher yish koyomar Hashem l'sarisim. This is what Hashem says to those who have no children. Putu, this is what Hashem says to you. Asher yishmenu shabsoisai uvacharu b'asher chafatzti. They came back after such a terrible tragedy, and they kept Shabbos, and they kept doing them. You kept doing mitzvahs. Machzikim bevrisi. And machzikim, not only did you, but you helped us in ways that everyone in this room knows how we could not be what we were without your partnership with Neini. V'nasati lehem b'veisi v'chaymoisai yod vashem. You definitely had children. You had a yad vashem. You had a definite memorial in all of us. Is it a coincidence that, as my brother Sholi mentioned, how many people are zeicha to a petira? We are surrounded by loved ones, crying, saying Shema Yisrael, in appreciation of a lifetime, and for the gifts that you gave us. So yes, Hashem says to the Sarisim, to the people who are barren of children, you were dedicated, you came back, and you kept mitzvahs, you kept the Torah, and you came, and you were a partner with Neini in what you did for us. So too Hashem says, you have definitely in my house, in my future, Yad Vashem. You need not worry that you Machar Shmoi B'Yisrael, that your family namesake is forgotten, besides for the fact that all of our children have the family names of your father and mother, and a brother, and so on. But it's more than that. You've left your fingerprint. And when you come up to Shamayim, the calculation won't be what we look at with our naked eyes without understanding the history and the future. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what you went through. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows the psychological scars that such a lifetime can leave. And He's the Dayan Ha'emes, and He will judge you accordingly. Moch Hashem Dinu Al Kalpana.
Thank you, Uncle Yankel. And I appreciate the accolades of you saying that I'm there and I've been there for them. But as I say, what goes around comes around. And on that day we got the phone call on November 25th on my way into the office that Nani had the stroke. There was no question in my mind how many times Nani and Putu dropped their life to take care of our lives in our most difficult times of needs. So it didn't take any thought process, it was an instinct, and it's something that I feel that finally I can do something to repay all that Neni and Putu have done for me and for our entire family. It's really difficult to be standing here at the Levaya of Shmuel Mordechai ben Shimon Reich, Shimon, who I'm named after. Shmuel Mordechai was also known to the world as Martin Rich, but to us, he was simply Putu Bachi. Putu Bachi was a great uncle. He was my great uncle. But to me and my siblings, that was never referred to or considered as that. He was never referred to or considered as that. A great uncle, in my mind, is somebody who you might call once or twice a year to say Gejontiv or to say Gebenchjur. Some 41 years ago, that's how old I am, Putu Bachi held me, my first day of life, and comforted me the day I was born. Some 41, yesterday, I had the opportunity to hold his hand and comfort him during his final hours. B'shatz Yitzias Nishmasai, as my brothers mentioned, he was surrounded by those who loved him and those who he loved. He was surrounded and comforted by the nine of us who were able to be there until he took his last breath. I was there with my 4 siblings, Plyla, Shai, Sholi, and Brindy. My wife Fegi was there. My brother-in-law David, our lovely cousin Adyan, of course, Yanko, Uncle Yanko. It will be a night that we'll never forget. The atmosphere in that room was palpable. It was a sad moment, but at the same time, watching him the last day, I was with him from about 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, where he was finally at peace. He was having a very hard time emotionally, as we've heard, with a lot of demons that he had to struggle with, and psychological issues having to do with